Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm very pleased to speak on this motion today, and it's very pleasing to have discussion facilitated on the Pacific. In my opinion, we don't do it enough as a parliament, so this is a great opportunity. And I'm going to confine my remarks to Fiji. As members might know, I'm of Fijian heritage and maintain an abiding interest in Fiji and the Fijian people. And I would also note that we're not too far off. On the 10th of October, Fiji will be celebrating its 50th anniversary of independence, which will be a very important milestone in their history. And I also want to acknowledge the member for Werriwa is here, who has a very large Australian Indian population, whom she represents so ably. So today's motion is an acknowledgement of the strategic importance of Australia's relationship, including with Fiji. And while the issues raised are certainly worthy of discussion, I also think it warrants reflection on a number of gaps in the Australia-Fiji relationship. There will be huge challenges for Fiji in the years ahead. Our most populated Pacific neighbour, of course, other than New Zealand, and they have been particularly hard hit economically by the travel restrictions. Fiji is one of Australia's closest friends in the Pacific. We share a common bond and a willingness to promote our shared values of freedom and respect throughout the region. Fijians themselves are active global citizens. They're not restricted by their island status or small population. Interesting to note, since 1970, since independence, Fiji has actually provided more personnel per capita to UN peacekeeping missions than any other foreign nation, and they wear that as a badge of honour, and rightly so. As the Fijian Prime Minister Bainimarama said, Fijians believe that the right of peace should be enjoyed by all humanity. As an island nation dealing first-hand with the effects of human-induced climate change, Fiji has also been at the forefront of international efforts to reduce global emissions. So across many fronts, Fiji is a Pacific and an international leader. It is unfortunately the case that, unlike our Fijian friends, Australia has a track record, in some cases, of neglecting our responsibilities. I am deeply concerned that some of our government policies have either undermined the importance of key strategic relationships in the region or failed to promote them. And this disrespect goes all the way to the top, with Prime Minister Bainimarama describing the government's posture on climate change previously as very insulting, very condescending. But what I really want to highlight is of real import for Australia's strategic interests in the Pacific is that of soft power. The stability and security of the Pacific region cannot be taken for granted, and it must not be neglected, and it won't be achieved with empty words about stepping up or being family. And nor will it be realised if Australia fails to leverage the tools it has at its disposal to engage with our Pacific nations. Yet this government has cut funding to the ABC, cuts that diminish the strength of Australia's international broadcaster and in turn undermine the safety and security of Australians in the region. Since this government took office in 2013, the ABC's capacity has been substantially reduced. The Australian network has been shut down. The ABC's shortwave radio transmissions across the Pacific have been switched off, a direct result of funding cuts. Meanwhile, the People's Republic of China has been doing the exact opposite, working to boost China's international media voice by making significant investments to expand the coverage, presence and reach of Chinese media, including taking over the shortwave radio frequencies previously occupied by the ABC. Now, nature abhors a vacuum. In the face of rising concerns about disinformation and misinformation, this government is cutting funding to Australia's most trusted source of news and information. The ABC's April 2020 submission on strengthening Australia's relationship with countries in the Pacific sets out a host of ways in which, with greater resourcing, the ABC's public diplomacy role could be strengthened. With a budget of only $11 million per annum, funding for ABC international broadcasting is being dwarfed by other nations. This government should bolster it and Australia's influence and the capacity of Pacific voices in the region. To put it in perspective, this government has granted $40 million over 6 years to Fox Sports for women's and niche sports. So while I welcome this motion here today, surely our Pacific footprint warrants much more than it is getting from this